What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Cannon Fodder, and this is my review of the Season 2 premiere of The Gifted, one of Fox's latest attempts, and now one of their last attempts at milking the X-Men rights for all they're worth before those rights go back to Marvel Studios where they belong. For the record, I thought Season 1 of The Gifted was okay. Not great, but it had potential. And that's a good way to sum up the whole show, actually, that it has potential, but a lot of the time that potential is unrealized because of various things like creative decisions that don't quite work out, or some characters being less interesting than others, or the premise itself maybe being a little faulty, that premise being that it's an X-Men show without the X-Men, or the cool costumes, or any of the classic stories, or the big action set pieces, probably because the show doesn't have the budget for those things. Now here we are at the start of Season 2, and it doesn't seem like much has changed. There have been some improvements, and I'll get to those in a second, but mostly it seems like more of the same stuff, which is not bad necessarily, but at the same time I'm not seeing many signs of the show leveling up here. One of my issues with the first season is that the show didn't seem to be very ambitious. Action sequences tended to be kind of underwhelming, especially if they involved mutant powers. I don't know how much money they're working with, but I suspect it's less money than a show like this would need to make stuff like that come off well. And it looks like that's still a problem. There are parts of this premiere where the production team obviously had to cut corners, and unfortunately it really shows. For instance, there's a scene where Sentinel Services attacks an apartment complex where a bunch of mutants live, like dozens of mutants if not more. So you figure this should be really cool. There's gonna be tons of action with mutants using their powers to fight back in creative ways and doing lots of crazy cool shit. Maybe they'll throw in a cameo or two, and none of that happens. It's weird. There's one moment where a mutant tries to run up a wall to escape or something, but aside from that, these mutants don't really use their powers at all. It's not that exciting, they don't put up a fight really, they just get captured like a bunch of normal, non-powered humans. Are we even sure these were mutants? Because they were not acting like it. There's a scene in a car where Clarice is trying to pass for human that only seems to exist so Jamie Chung didn't have to go through the Blink makeup that day so they could save a few bucks on that. And there's a scene at the end where the Stepford Cuckoos give Lorna a telepathic vision, and the effects on that where the camera travels through her eye and into her mind are shockingly bad. It looked like CG from the late 90s or something. It was pretty awful, actually. The show is full of examples like this, of the mutant powers being used very judiciously, and it's frustrating, you know? If you want to do a mutant show, do a freaking mutant show. But you have to know that's what comic fans are tuning in for, so I don't know why these powers tend to look unimpressive or are used on such a small scale, other than them just not having the budget to do anything else. Maybe they were saving their money for the big set piece at the end when Lorna's powers are going haywire and they're affecting all the metal around her for miles, and credit where it's due, that scene does look better than anything else in the episode, but even this part is weighed down by the lazy way it was set up. Her powers are out of control due to her being in agonizing pain because she's having a difficult labor. Okay, but why can't they just give her some painkillers or something? You spent a whole subplot explaining to us how well-funded the Hellfire Club is, how they have millions and millions of dollars to play with, how they set aside a whole building for Lorna to give birth in, with lots of fancy equipment and a doctor and everything, but they can't give her a shot of morphine when she's in horrible pain and wreaking havoc on anything metal within 10 miles of her? That's a strange oversight. Did they blow their last dime on the building and not have anything left for a syringe? And then everything's going wrong, Lorna's screaming and screaming, she's in so much pain, and she's not dilating and she has to push the baby out anyway somehow, and I'm sitting here wondering, if the labor is this difficult, why the hell can't they just do a C-section? And it never comes up. The only answer I could think of is that the writers needed Lorna's life to be in danger and her to be in the worst pain imaginable, so her powers would flare up so the good guys would have a way of almost tracking her down in order for the story to get from point A to point B. And also because her powers wrecking stuff would be cool to watch. And it was. But if the characters had been a little smarter, they could have easily stopped all that from even happening, so the whole thing feels kind of unearned. Character-wise, we don't have much to go on yet. There aren't any huge revelations in that department. Marcos and Lorna are still separated, with Marcos still with the Underground and Lorna with the Hellfire Club now, and the actors try to make you feel bad about that, but the writing doesn't really show it, and the emotional impact is pretty soft overall. John and Clarice are in a relationship and living together now, and I'm just not feeling it. I like these two characters, I just don't like them together. I thought John and Dreamer made a cute couple in Season 1, but the love triangle with Clarice was one of the weakest elements of that season. It just didn't work. She only had feelings for John in the first place because Dreamer implanted false memories in her brain, so regardless of what happened or developed between them after that, the basis for the relationship they have now is completely artificial. You don't know if it's real or just because of the fake memories, and maybe that'll be a plot point later, but right now I see them together and I just don't feel anything. Now, one area where I think the show has taken a step forward is with the Strucker family. One of my complaints about Season 1 is that the human characters were just not very interesting, but they seem to be trying to fix that. With Caitlin, she's messed up over Andy falling in with the Hellfire Club, she's desperate to get her son back, and that desperation is driving her to do some crazy things, and she gets to be kind of a badass in one scene because of this. And okay, this is how I like my Amy Acker. Let her do more stuff like this, please. And then there's Reed, who we found out last season is a mutant, or was supposed to be a mutant, was born a mutant, but his father had experimented on him and suppressed his powers with science. But most likely, due to all the stress he's been under, whatever Reed's dad did to him is wearing off and those powers are finally manifesting. And the character still doesn't do much for me. He was pretty much my least favorite character coming into this, but just the fact that Reed is going to have powers now immediately makes him so much more interesting than he ever was last season. I really didn't care what he did in Season 1 most of the time. Now, at least I'm interested to see if he might blow up or blast a hole through a wall or something. You know, mutant power stuff. The kind of stuff you tune into an X-Men show to watch. It remains to be seen if they'll have the budget to follow through on that, but if they can have at least one sequence an episode with cool mutants doing cool mutant stuff, I think they ought to be able to hold on to that X-Men audience and have a successful show until such time as Marvel takes back legal ownership of the rights and pulls the plug on it. They just have to make sure they stick the landing in the writing department from now on. And that's about it, really. It wasn't a blowaway episode or anything, but it wasn't terrible and you could certainly do worse. If you liked last season, you'll probably like this. I was hoping for more of a sign that the show had worked on the issues with Season 1 and was ready to knock it out of the park here, and that didn't exactly happen, but I was still engaged enough to tune in next week. But what did you guys think of the season premiere of The Gifted? Let me know down below. And while you're commenting about it, don't forget to help me break the YouTube algorithm's back and make it humble by subscribing, giving the video a big fat thumbs up, sharing it around with all your friends, and smashing that bell icon so you can be notified whenever new videos get uploaded, because if you're just a subscriber who has not rung that bell icon, you're not going far enough. I talk movies, TV, comics, trailers, and more, so if you like what you see here, stay tuned, and I'll be back real soon with the next one. Until then, over. Out.